Now we're going to talk about Kierkegaard. Søren Kierkegaard, the most prominent, if not the only, Danish philosopher. He comes from Denmark. Interestingly enough, this story, we already heard it with Schopenhauer. Same thing with Kierkegaard, even worse than that. He was completely unknown during his life. Well, completely unknown, I would say, as the world-class philosopher. He was known in Copenhagen to many people, but for different reasons, actually. His books were not popular. They were published in about 500 copies, and he did not have some sort of impact on the world of philosophy until 20th century, which is already many, many years after he died. It's only in the 20th century when existentialism really picked up, and then philosophers rediscovered him and were like, wow, that is amazing. He already had all these ideas back then. But his life is kind of interesting in itself. So he was born in Copenhagen, May 5th, 1813. So that is, of course, younger than Schopenhauer. But again, he all kind of overlaps with him quite a bit. In fact, he died even before Schopenhauer because he didn't live that long. Entered Copenhagen University when he was 17 years old. His father also played an important role in his life, just like for Schopenhauer. Remember, his father committed suicide. Well, Kierkegaard's father did not commit suicide, but he himself was a very interesting person. He actually was very poor, from a very poor peasant family. He moved to Copenhagen to work for his uncle and made himself a fortune there. He actually one of those self-made men who was able to have a successful business, successful career, come from virtually nothing to one of the richest people in Copenhagen. But because of that, he had also a lot of feeling of guilt because he thought as a Christian, he was not a very good Christian, right? Because becoming rich, well, you need to cross a few lines now and then. We don't know exactly which lines, but I'm sure that there were lines he crossed, and that weighed on him his entire life, and he wanted his son to be different, because he thought, well, we already have money, so now the job I have is to make sure my children, and he actually had many children. Søren was, I think, the youngest one out of like 7 or something. But anyway, he wanted them to have a totally different life. He wanted them to be good Christians. So at first he wanted Søren to major in theology, study the Christian doctrine and so on. But later, as it often happens, it was the case with Hegel pretty much too, Søren kind of moved towards philosophy. However, he still had a thing with the religion, except in a different way, you may say. So there are 4 turning points in his life which are important to mention. First, the relationship with his father, which I already started talking about. Then the relationship with his only female lover, and battle with the press and battle with Danish church. All of them are important parts of his philosophy as well, because they actually influenced it quite a bit. So first, let's start with his father. Like I said, his father was the self-made man, businessman. Very, very successful, wealthy, also left Søren quite a lot of money when he finally died, but unlike Schopenhauer's father, he actually lived a very long time. Deeply religious Protestant, tortured by a morbid sense of guilt for all his moral failures, gave his son very stern, oppressive religious upbringing, tried to make him a good Christian. Kierkegaard rebelled against the religious pressures of his childhood by trying to squeeze out of life all the pleasures he could. When he started university, he was like a playboy. He was trying to go to all the parties, have a lot of relationship with different women, and drink, and have real good life. However, according to his journals, he was eaten up by this too. It did kind of weigh on him. This is a good quote from one of his journals he wrote at that time. It says, "I have just returned from a party of which I was life and soul. Wheat poured from my lips. Everyone laughed, admired me. But I went away, and the dash could be as long as the Earth's orbit. And I wanted to shoot myself. So while he was pretending to have fun, he actually did not enjoy it. He did not enjoy it. Why not? Well, I'm guessing there were some psychological issues too. But his philosophy later, he's trying to kind of describe it in his philosophy. So eventually he decided that his father was right. And he tried to go back towards religion. His father, like I said, he died at 81 years old. That was already 1838. Kierkegaard himself at that time was, 25 years old. So, and he was one of the youngest children. You can also do the math. His father had him when he was already in his 50s. By the way, another thing with his mother. His mother was his father's servant. She first started as a servant in his household. Then he had some relationship with her and eventually married her, and she gave him all these children. So also kind of an interesting story in itself. So he realized that harsh upbringing his father was giving him was for his own good. And because of that, he began to understand God's love and turned back towards Christianity, but with some twist, you may say. Then the relationship with his only female lover. That is a very, very upsetting story, you may say, because he did met this girl, Regina Olsen, when she was 18 years old, and was engaged to get married with her. But as he was engaged to get married, she actually loved him. She wanted him to marry her. He had a change of heart, and for, let me say, slightly weird reasons. He thought that, several reasons why he decided to break up with her. One of them, he thought that he's not made for family life. He is not good for that. And he thought that his calling in life is to actually write and dedicate himself to God and to writing rather than to family life. But the tragic part was how he decided to break it off. He did not want to just tell her that he doesn't want to marry her. So he decided to go perhaps the most stupid way you can possibly go. He decided to torture her to the point where she will break up with him. To act in such a horrible way that she herself will say, "Oh no, I don't want to marry you." You can imagine how that went. Not very nicely. He did eventually accomplish that, but he did torture her. He tortured himself. The whole story is very sad, and of course had an impact on both of them. And by the way, she later married somebody else. He obviously still loved her. He left her some money in his will. He died fairly young. She was still alive. Right, so and she had to donate it to charity, because I mean, imagine how awkward it was. She's married to somebody else, and your previous fiance leaves them money. Like, okay, yeah, we can't take it. That's definitely not a good idea. Okay, so yeah, he broke off engagement after 13 months, and then following that, he actually went to Berlin to listen to Schelling. Hegel was already dead, but I remember I mentioned Schelling. He was Hegel's buddy, who at first they were like together, and then so Schelling was still alive. He was lecturing there, and Kierkegaard attended his lectures in Berlin. So this is the picture of her. In case if you're curious, it's in the book too. Regina Olsen, age 18. This is the same year that she became engaged to Kierkegaard, who was actually 9 years older. But well, at the time it was quite normal kind of age difference. And then the battle with the press. So the way it started was kind of silly. They had this newspaper in Copenhagen called The Corsair, and that was kind of more of a satiric paper. They published all sorts of stuff, and he started writing books a few years earlier, and his previous books they kind of gave them good reviews, right? They liked it. But then he published the postscript, the concluding unscientific postscript in 1846. And they didn't like this book. And they gave it a bad review. He should have just ignored it. But he did not. And he wrote them a letter in a kind of also rather sarcastic way, saying, I'm very glad that you guys hated my most recent book, but I have a different problem. Your crappy paper has given good reviews to my previous books, and that kind of puts the bad rap for them. So please repudiate these good reviews, and I don't want any good review coming from you. And they did just that. They started dumping on all of his books, and he started writing letters, and the whole thing was very messy, and the whole Copenhagen found out of it. It had a huge impact on his life because he became kind of a celebrity, but in a bad sense, right? People wanted to see him, but not for good reasons, and he didn't enjoy that at all because he didn't want people to look at him, and yet he was followed by the crowd almost anywhere he went after this, and it really tortured him. Because people were pretty much laughing at him, following him around, and he could not be alone anywhere. So that did kind of, at the time, he was considering just leaving writing altogether and becoming a priest, but because of this incident, he decided to continue writing. Which I guess for us is good, but for him maybe it was not as good. And then battle with the church. You may wonder, given that he seemed to be religious, what was his problem with the church? Oh, he had a huge problem. And actually, it's a big part of his philosophy. He thinks the church as it existed in Denmark at the time, and I'm sure he would think that the way it is usually became an institution. People going to church and pretending to believe in God. It's just a game for them. In order for, to have some social standing, you go to church once a week and you pretend to listen to all this stuff, but you don't really live the way Christ intended you to live, and the whole church itself is not following Christ. So he called it Christendom. Christendom to him is like this cultural event. They show pretending to be Christians rather than truly being Christians. And he really wanted to figure out, what does it really mean to be a Christian? What does it mean? What did Christ mean? And that was a big part of his philosophy too. So, as you can imagine, his life wasn't very happy with all this stuff happening. And he, like I said, he died fairly young, 1855. Few days before he died, he was already on a deathbed. They asked him if he wanted to see a priest. And he actually said, well, not not the one from the regular church, because I don't think they are the kind of people who have anything to do with the true religion. After he died, his brother gave a speech at his funeral, which was also meant to kind of quiet down this entire controversy, but there were still some younger people, some students who actually followed his writing, followed the whole thing, and they started kind of a riot there because they didn't think that what his brother was saying was true to the spirit of Kierkegaard himself, so the whole thing turned into yet another show. His philosophy overall, several books he has written do address it more directly, although, as we will see today, his favorite way of actually doing philosophy is indirect communication. He did not think he should be point blank telling you what he means. What he does, especially in his earlier books, is he assumes different persona. Not even himself. He's not writing it as Kierkegaard. He's writing it as somebody else. And he tells you things, and he wants you to go through this and kind of learn by reading it, what does he mean? But of course, in this class, we can't just read all his books and then talk about it, even though I do want you to do another reading next week, which will be, it's very interesting, and we will talk about it next time. It's a good example of like his argument. But somewhere you can figure out a little bit more precisely what does he mean. So in concluding unscientific postscript, Kierkegaard describes an afternoon when he was sitting in a cafe. And he was actually thinking about what should he do in life. And that also resonates with his journal entry. So he was thinking everybody is trying to make our life easier, right? People constantly invent those things to make it easier. Can you see it? Like even back then, that was almost 200 years ago, but people were already, there was already capitalism, people were already doing it. So inventing an easier can openers, an easier this and that, everybody tries to make our life easy. So he thought, I can't do that, I'm not good at these things at all. But how about I do the opposite and try to make our life hard? That would be a good way to do it. Here is a quote, he says, out of love for mankind and out of despair at my embarrassing situation, that he cannot make our life easier, seeing that I had accomplished nothing and was unable to make anything easier than it had already been made, and moved by a genuine interest in those who make everything easy, I conceived it my task to create difficulties everywhere and to make life difficult. Why? Why do you think he wanted to do that? What could he possibly mean there?
Complacency.
Out of complacency, right? Because that's again what he meant in his diary. We go through life every day, we wake up in the morning, go to work, have dinner, I don't know, watch TV, go to bed, wake up, go to work, have dinner, watch TV. Do we ever think about why the hell are we doing all that? Well, rarely, if ever. Some people never think about that. But isn't it the most important thing? And he's saying, yes, it is the most important thing. You may not necessarily agree with him on many other things, but it does seem like this is something we can all agree about. Most people don't think about it, not because it's not important to them, but just because they think, well, even if I think about it, I'm not going to find anything there, right? I may as well just go to work. But even with that, like, doesn't it have influence on your own life? Because if you just go with the flow, what do you think are the chances of you eventually being satisfied with your life? I mean, it's possible, but don't you think you have better chances if you actually take control of your life and try to steer it in the direction you want it to go? But then what is the direction you want it to go? Which is another important question, right? And that is something we will also talk about next time. But yeah, do you think we have it too easy? By we, I mean people who live in this country. Some people obviously would disagree, but I guess those are people who never lived in Africa or something. Because if you did, you would see that actually we have it very easy compared to people there. Or Middle East, or some other parts where people are too busy surviving and finding food for every day. And their problems are far away from, can I afford the latest iPhone? Which is what most Americans are concerned with. Not to say that we don't have problems, right? We also have unemployment and have homelessness. But overall, now, in this country, we are certainly very blessed in a sense of having so much. There's an interesting statistics about it. Like if you rank the entire world in terms of income from top to bottom, and like where do you stand? And you can actually look it up online. You can enter your own income and you can see where exactly do you stand. And like virtually no American is less than like somewhere around here. And the rest of the world is like India, China, is way below that. An average is like way below that. Because most of the world, like the biggest chunk of the population is India and China. Now those rich countries, well, China does have some people who actually make money, but majority of people there are very poor. The people who live in the countryside, the peasants, which is majority of their population, right? And there's billions of people. In India, that's another very populous country, also very poor. And Africa, the entire continent, is very poor, insanely poor. And this is majority of people in the world. So in that sense, of course, we have it much easier. And whether it's too easy, well, it's hard to say what's too easy. But definitely for most of us, it is very easy. So another quote, my principal thought was that those of our time, because of so much knowledge, have forgotten what it is to exist and the meaning of inwardness. We are so concerned now with this purely capitalistic approach of like money and goods, entertainment, that we never even bother to think about this, while it is the most important thing, right? First of all, what is it to exist? What does it mean to exist? You only get it, probably, unless you agree with Plato in their multiple lives, we probably only get it once for a number of years. Never before, never after. What does it mean? Should we use it for something more than just buying latest iPhones? Is there more to that than this? We would hope so, right? So he, again, just like Schopenhauer, doesn't give as much value to reason and analysis. He thinks that the passion and commitment are the most important things in life. The life's greatest rewards come only to those who are willing to endure difficulties and even suffering. For Kierkegaard, the most important and most difficult goal is self-understanding. To understand yourself. That is what Greeks were saying. There is the famous Greek saying, gnosi theauton, to know yourself. That's actually in the reading too. It's right there. Know yourself, who you are. That is the most important thing. But most of us never bother with that. We take this stance of detachment and view life as spectators. And the same thing he actually accuses most philosophers. They view philosophy as some sort of a show. They look at it from the outside. Saying Hegel in particular, his criticism towards Hegel seems to be like he is describing it from the outside point of view. But what is this outside? Are we outside of it? Can we ever be outside of it? No, we are part of it. We're right in the middle of it. And the most important question, which is how should I live, is not addressed by any of the philosophers. They describe the way the whole system works, but he says that's always flawed because you cannot know how the system works because you're part of the system. You are biased. You're not God. Only God can see the whole thing. You cannot see the whole thing, but you can see yourself, and that is something which is missing from most philosophy. We are more comfortable this way. We are more comfortable using reason and analysis than passion and commitment. So he says that's why he wants to make our life difficult, to provide those problems which we need to resolve, to wake us up. The more honest we are with ourselves, the more despair we would experience. Despair is a very important word in existentialism. Until we finally realize that we cannot become fully actualized selves apart from, well, he thinks relationship to God. That is his answer. Yes, actually, we will see next time that this is, to him, that's the most important thing. If we look deeply inside ourselves, we will find God, and that is what would give ourselves sense of meaning. While most philosophers sought to provide answers to our problems, Kierkegaard sought to provide problems to our comfortable answers. His goal was to destroy one by one every one of our cherished solutions until in despair we would realize only one is left. And that one is God. Like I said, he's doing it through indirect communication. He's trying to assume different positions. His master thesis was on concept of irony in Socrates. So that, of course, is something we already mentioned when we talked about Socrates. Remember what Socrates was doing? What is irony there? And what was Socratic method? What did Socrates do? Mini review for the final two.
Was it dialectic?
Yeah, but more specifically.
Well, he was using logic and reasoning, right? And he didn't believe.
Okay, but how? Did he sit at home by himself and use logic?
No, I think he was arguing. He was going up to people and then asking them.
He was
like, what they're
approaching
thinking.
people, asking them questions. And remember another thing, he actually said he himself didn't know anything. And he was asking them to teach him. That was the idea. Like, you are a judge. You are such a smart person. Tell me what justice is. I don't know. I'm stupid. You're smart. Tell me. And then what happened? It turned out that they are even more stupid than he is. Because at the very least, he says, I know that I don't know anything. But they don't know anything and they think they do. So that is the irony here, right? They think they know, but they don't. They pretend they know, but they don't. And so when he was doing that, people were getting mad at him. But nonetheless, that also was hopefully at least teaching them something. So you see that Kierkegaard is trying to do the same thing. Just basically annoy people to the point that it would wake them up and give them realization that they are missing something important here. So he assumes those different persona. For example, Fear and Trembling, which is the next reading, is written by Johannes de Silencio, the John of Silence. And that Johannes is actually talking there about an interesting part of the Bible, Abraham and his son Isaac. So actually we'll go over it a little bit more in the end of class, but all his books are like this, right? Well, not all. In the end, his diaries are, obviously, he's writing them from the first person, and in the end, he wrote a few works which are also kind of in the first person, but some scholars now actually questioning even that. They're saying when he writes it as himself, is he still writing it as himself, or is it yet another persona, Kierkegaard, the writer? Right? So that is also possible. We never really know when is he telling us exactly what he means and when he's trying to pretend to be somebody else, even if he uses his own name. So one of the most important distinctions there is objective knowing versus subjective knowing. He's saying everybody wants to have this objective knowledge of everything, right? Objective means it's true from any point of view. But according to Kierkegaard, that is actually the most useless knowledge you can possibly have. And the hardest thing, the hardest task in life is not to be objective, but to be subjective. To actually have your own point of view. To accept this objective position is the easiest thing of all. That's what everybody does. What is the hardest thing is to find your own position. So to him, he says, truth is subjectivity. Now, obviously, subjectivity can be used in two different senses. Good and bad type of subjectivity. So when we say somebody is being too subjective, like for example, if when I'm grading you guys and I start giving good grades to students I like and bad grades to students I don't like, right? Bias. That's a bad type of objectivity. We don't want that type of objectivity. But this is not what Kierkegaard actually means. He is talking about being subjective as in kind of bringing yourself into what you do. Related to agents' needs, interests, values, which are different for all of us. And we have to actually make it part of ourselves, of our nature. Decide who we are. So let's go back to the Hegel's example, because it's actually, when we talked about Hegel and freedom, that's a very good example to introduce you. So remember, first of all, that we talked about 3 doors, right? You have 3 doors, and you can choose any one you want. Remember how it goes? And so when you don't know what's behind them, you don't know which one to pick, but then you are told that behind one door they will murder you, behind the other they will rob you, and behind the third one you will find the love of your life. And so then you pick the third door, because obviously you no longer have any choice. Now here's how we have to change it with Kierkegaard so you could understand. One thing he would immediately say is like, is this the real kind of choices we typically have in life? No, that is not something which is ever so obvious. But let's look at it a different way. Let's say 3 doors is like the 3 majors you have to pick in college. Right? One door, medical, doctor, or lawyer. That's one career. The other door, a philosophy professor. The third door, musician. Which one should you pick? Now, if you ask your parents, what are they more likely to tell you? Huh? Yeah, I'm a doctor or a lawyer. No brainer, right? Money is here. They would say, never do be a musician. It's not going to make a penny out of it. Philosopher, most people would also say, philosopher. What good is this major? Are you kidding me? But what about you? Is this always the right solution for you? Have you seen people who actually become lawyers and hate it? There's another bunch of videos on TikTok I have seen. It's actually literally lawyers who say, yeah, I make like 200 grand a year. Hate it. And like, I quit tomorrow. And then they actually quit. Why? Because this is very, very unpleasant thing to do. Like, just seriously, like these are real people, and that is why I like TikTok sometimes. And they say the other lawyers are so mean. They all hate each other, right? Anytime, especially if you like defense attorney or something, the other ones, they'll be badgering you. They'll be so bad with you. Like you really, like you start hating yourself. It is such a. And the other thing, people think lawyers, they think about the courtroom drama when they making speeches in court. Is that what they do for the most part? Oh no, it's all document writing. It's like this long paper type thing. You have to write all these arguments for appeals and so on, lay it out, and this is dreadful stuff. Okay, but should you be a musician? I always think about interesting example here when, I don't know, do you guys know John Lennon? From the Beatles? Yeah, he actually mentioned that, but he didn't have a mother. His mother was not, he did not grow up with his mother, but he grew up with his Aunt Mimi. And his famous saying Aunt Mimi had, John, guitar is not the kind of thing which will ever make you a living. Was she right? No. In fact, when he died, he got $150 million, which at the time was like $1 billion now. It's 1980. And another guy from Beatles, Paul McCartney, who's still alive as a billionaire. So that shows you that at least for some people that obviously is not true. Of course, you have to decide for yourself whether it's true for you, right? What should you go by? Can other people tell you this? No, you're the only one who can decide that. Same thing with philosophy. Like I'm actually doing philosophy. I'm very happy with it. But are there people who chose philosophy, tried to major in philosophy and thus failed? Oh yeah. a lot of them. 'Cause that's actually is not easy to get through like the entire process. If you get just a bachelor's in philosophy, well, as much as I love philosophy, I have to be honest, that's not going to give you very much. With the bachelor's in philosophy, the best you can do is probably law school. For law school, it's a good pre-law major. But for everything else, like, you're not going to be a philosopher, that's for sure. Maybe you like can get some sort of a bank job or something, but again, if you want a bank job, why start with philosophy? So you see, that's the problem. And this is a real problem for all of us. I went through it, I'm sure you guys went through it, you probably still have some doubts about it because you pick a major thinking, that is something I really like computer science. There is a good money in computer science. Right before your class, I have a class, Field 114, which is logic for future computer science majors. Like almost everybody there is a computer science major. So what do you think happened? We have towards the end of class. More than half of the class is pretty much failing because it's good money, but you really have to have, I wouldn't even say, it's not about being smart, but it is a skill. You have to be very good with this specific skill. It's like math a lot, even harder than math, right? So if you're good with it, yeah, you can make good money. But if you're bad with it and you pick this major, then guess what happens? You start getting Fs, you start failing classes, you may drop out of college altogether. So this is just an example of how this choice is never easy. You may even know about like how much money each one of them makes and what are they supposed to do, but when you decide it for yourself, you have to have passion. You actually have to really tell yourself, first of all, be honest with yourself in terms of what you are choosing, and have passion for what you're going to do. Because if you don't have passion for that, just logically knowing that this is good money or whatever, not going to give you anything. So that's his point. So what is exactly, in this sense, our question of which door should you pick? Each one should decide for yourself, and the answer for one of you may be completely different from the answer for the other one. Only you know this answer. So that would be an example which shows what Kierkegaard's point is. Knowing the truth is not the same thing as being in the truth. You may know the truth very well and still not understand it properly because it's not part of your life. Objectivity is, from subjective point of view, merely a hypothesis or approximation. We can never know with complete certainty anything. There is an interesting example, again from Concluding Unscientific Postscript. Sometimes I do actually assign it as a reading, I didn't this time, but there's an interesting part there. So he's talking about this guy who was insane. He had some sort of mental problems. And he escaped mental institution. So in order to, he wasn't completely insane, right? But in order not to be returned there, he thought, I should say something to people that would prove that I'm not insane. And I think he found it like a ball or something, and he was carrying it in his back pocket, and as he was walking, he was telling everybody, boom, the earth is round, to prove to them that he is not insane. So what do you think people thought about him? If somebody tells you this, boom, the earth is round. And he is completely insane. So what is his point here? Is that true that the earth is round? Yeah, it's objective truth. But what is the problem in this case? Why is he telling it to people? How is it relevant? Right? If somebody tells you this kind of truth out of place, you will just think they are crazy, even though it is absolutely true. So that's the point he's trying to make, right? The truth only matters when it is in appropriate circumstances for appropriate matter. The abstract truth is completely pointless. So the fact that the earth is round is great, but unless you need it for something, saying it just makes you sound insane. only ethical and ethico-religious knowing is essential knowing for us. Why? Because ethics tells us, remember, how we should live our life, what we should do. And that is the fundamental question. Anything we try to learn, all this knowledge, only has relevance in relation to that, because this is the most important point of all. With our previous example about whether there are 12 students in a classroom next to ours, well, unless it is somehow affecting us, do we care? No, we don't care. It may be true or not true. This truth of this is irrelevant, completely irrelevant, unless it is important for us for some other sense. And the most important thing, again, is ethical issues. The ethics, the question of how should you live your life. What is the goal of your life? Because we are not objects. We are not gods. We are human beings who have existence, who are doing things on a daily basis, and this is the most important question for all of us as human beings. So if you have a knower, you have the truth, and you have relation between the knower and the truth. Where should you put an emphasis? So here's a good example from, again, the unconcluded unscientific postscript. He is saying that many people find it controversial, but this is what he's saying. If one who lives in the midst of the Christendom goes up to the house of God, the house of the true God, with the true conception of God and his knowledge, and prays, but prays in false spirit, and one who lives in adulterous community prays with the entire passion of the infinite, although his eyes rest upon an image of an idol, where is the most truth? The one prays in truth to God, though he worships the idol. Another prays falsely to the true God, and hence worships, in fact, an idol. So you see here talking about these two situations. One person goes to church and prays to real God. Let's say Christian God is the real God, right? So there is like the image of the Jesus or whatever. Person goes there and prays. So this is the real God. But he does it in false spirit. He does it just as a show, to pretend for other people or whatever. And there's another person who maybe lives in the jungle and worships an idol, but he has true passion in his heart. And when he prays to this idol, he does it with all his heart. So who is in the truth? This person or this person? You say, of course it is this person. Because the most important question is this relation. How do you feel about it? What is in your heart? Whether the God is a true God or not is the second thing. He's actually not saying it's not important. Sometimes people think, well, based on this, you can just conclude that you can pray to the chair as long as you have like true passion in your heart. He's saying, no, if you pray to true God with true passion, it's even better. Right? But there has to be that passion and that truth inside of you to begin with. If that is not the case, it doesn't even matter whether the God is true or not. What matters is you being faithful. What do you guys think about it? So there is an interesting question there. What does it really mean then? Especially for those who are Christian, right? Well, or religious for that matter. So yes, there's not a big difference. What does it mean to be truly a religious person? Because for most people, and that's his criticism, right? He says for most people, all it means is once a week you should show up in church and like listen to the priest, read some sort of boring stuff, and then you sit there, fall asleep, and then you go back home. And that's pretty much the whole story. Every once in a while, if you need something, like you want to win a lottery or something, right, you will pray. You will ask God to help you out win a lottery. And that's pretty much the extent of it. Is that really what it means? What do you think? What would it mean for somebody to truly be a Christian? people twist it in such an amazing way that like people who consider themselves Christian don't see any problem. Even like, well, one of the most appalling examples I always think about. Have you heard about those priests who are molesting boys? What the? How? Like, I don't even have any words here. Like, you are a priest. You truly believe in God. And you're doing that? Like, how do they, to themselves even, like, how do they excuse that? Yeah, well, I guess they have some justification. I'm not sure it's exactly that. Like, do they believe they'll be forgiven or not? But they certainly somehow justify it for themselves. But looking at it from like our point of view, that is completely insane. I can't imagine how somebody. One thing is somebody is atheist, right, and like says, okay, I don't even believe God exists, and then they do some bad things. But if somebody is truly a religious person who believes in God, do you really think you can do these horrible things and just ask for forgiveness then? And God will be like, oh, okay, as long as you ask. I don't mind you molesting people, just ask for forgiveness, and then you'll be okay. What? Are you kidding me here? And yeah, because this is not even one-time thing. It's not like you molested a child, asked for forgiveness, never did it again. They keep on doing it. And that shows you like how hypocritical some people are. And that is priests. What about normal people who go to church? They're not even priests, right? Do they never sin? Oh, they sin all the time. It really becomes a show for them. Like once in a while I go to church. Perhaps when I die, God will be like, okay, you are a horrible person, but at least you went to church on Sundays. That way you go to paradise. Cover all the bases, right? Just in case. And that is something Kierkegaard really had a problem with. He thought, you cannot live your life like this. This is a lie. If you want to be honest and say, I don't believe in God, fine. But then say it. Don't pretend. On the other hand, if you consider yourself a Christian, well, there is the Bible. Read what it says and live the way Christ told you to live. Don't be hypocritical. Don't pretend like you actually believe when you're acting like that. So that is what the essence of his philosophy is. He thought that in some cases I can acquire certain results by relying on efforts of others, right? If I want to know how far the moon is, I don't need to fly to the moon. I can just get this information from others. But the most important things I cannot learn like this. I have to go through the process myself. Result will only be achieved if I go through it, which is why he used this indirect communication. He wants you to read the book and actually, with him, kind of go through this whole thing and understand, hopefully in the end, what he's trying to say by actually experiencing what he is trying to have you to experience. And in the end, he thinks God also should be a free choice. Once somebody proves to you the existence of God. And this is, I think I mentioned it already, this is where he completely rejects all those proofs of the existence of God. He says, and if somebody proves to you the existence of God like a mathematical formula, well, then you have no choice but to accept it, right? Then what's the value of it? You say, no. You can never know for sure God exists. That's the whole point. You have to stake your life on it without knowing that this is true. And that's what makes it valuable. If you know, but after you die, God will judge you for every sin, and you will go to hell, and if because of that you live a good life, what's the value of this good life? You're just afraid of punishment there. No, you don't know that, and you can't know that. For all you know, maybe there is no hell, no paradise, no God, nothing. Now try to be good. Now try to be a good person. If you do, that has value. Otherwise, it has no value whatsoever. So that should come from your will. That is decisive act of the will based on your decision. And that is the only way you can get to true faith. And this is again brings us back to Socrates. At his trial, Socrates reported to have said that he does not know whether there is life after death. And yet, he was perfectly fine with it. He said, I have no problem not knowing it, because, well, if there's nothing there, I have nothing to lose. But if there is life after death, I lived my life in such a way that I'll be proud of it. Right? So this is the argument for atheists as well as for religious people. Yeah, if there's nothing there, perhaps none of it matters. But do we know there's nothing there? Can you be 100% sure? No, for all we know, like in the Matrix, you may actually wake up somewhere and they'll be like, okay, how was your journey? Did you enjoy it? And then maybe somebody will even judge you for it and say, we have the full list of the things you did, like all those sins, all those horrible things you thought nobody knew. Well, there they are. We can even show you a video of you doing that, right? And now you will be responsible for all that. So that is the point. If we could have the complete knowledge of the existence of God, if we could have the proof of it, none of it would make any sense. Then why even go through the show? We may as well, right away end the whole experiment. But without knowing it, you really stake in your life in this as this most valuable thing you have without knowing the outcome. So the objective approach, at least at best, gives us hypothesis that is tentatively confirmed through a continual accumulation, weighing of evidence, or what he calls approximation process. His point is this: if you use your reason and logic to decide which one of these doors you should pick, you can continually come up with new arguments. And you guys know it, right? Sometimes when you try to decide something, you try to be logical and you come up with the reasons why you should go this way. But then aren't there always counter reasons why you should go this way? Yeah. At which point do you stop? Well, there's only two things. Either somebody shakes you up and say, okay, you have to choose now, or you shake yourself up. However, if you don't do that, then you can continue to deliberate forever. And sometimes people do. They take hours to decide something. Because reason will not definitively tell you, like in the example of the three doors, the way we looked at the previous example, that here they will kill you. Here. It's never that simple. You can always think that, oh, okay, well, I actually kind of like the law, but at the same time, can I even do that? Like, it's hard major. Maybe there could be problems. Law school is very hard, and so on and so forth. But only your passion and your true self can force you to decide one way or the other. Because in the end of the day, you have to just stop all this reasoning and say, okay, I decided this. And that is the only meaningful thing there. And faith should be like this too. You have to pick faith not because of reasons, but because you yourself think it's the right thing to do. And then it has value. So anything that is almost probable or extremely emphatically probable, something he can most know or as good as know or extremely emphatically almost know, but it is impossible to believe. In order to believe something, you can't have reasons and knowledge. In order to believe something, you have to have what? Faith. So you have to take what he calls a leap of faith. You have to indeed basically accept it without any proof. An objective uncertainty held fast in the approximation process of most passionate inwardness in the truth, the highest truth attainable for an existing individual. Just find it within yourself. Do you find God within yourself or not? If you do, that is the true faith. There is no other road to faith. If one wishes to escape risk, it is as if one wanted to know with certainty that he can swim before goes into the water. And you can. What's the only way to find out? Go into the water and swim. Religious choice must be made with the whole person. So we will talk more about it next time. He actually has kind of a system there. When you read all his books, even though he wants you first to read them, but when you read them, you understand that he does have a system. He's trying very hard not to have it as a system in that sense, but like I said, in this class we will have to go through it faster than reading all his books. Because I don't think I could just tell you, okay, read all of his books, we'll meet 2 years from now, and then we'll go back to this. So God is a subject and therefore exists only for subjectivity in inwardness. That's what he is saying. A philosopher's proof of the existence of God will not lead to faith. It will only leave one with logical syllogisms and dry intellectual dust, which will not quench anyone's spiritual thirst. Truth is inwardness, hence for Socrates, knowledge is the recollection. Remember, Socrates was saying that. Knowledge is a recollection. It's already inside of you. You just don't know it yet. And there are people who can maybe help you. Hopefully I can help you a little bit. But it has to be inside of you to begin with, otherwise you will never find it.